Welcome to the Excruciating Minutiae Podcast, where we obsess about sports, pop culture, and politics. But mostly sports. Here are your hosts, Randy and Steven.
Hello again, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Excruciating Minutia. I'm Randy, and I'll be joined shortly by Steven. But before we begin, I ask that you please check us out at excruciatingpodcast.com for links to all of your favorite places to listen to our episodes on a regular basis, or check us out at excruciatingpod for our Twitter feed as well. And today we'll be going with an off-topic Tuesday, a mishmash and potpourri of various subjects for us to go ahead and talk about. Steven, you have a number of things on the agenda here for us. Enlighten me. What are we going to be going with today?
Well, I wanted to start by asking you something. This is off-topic Tuesday, but it's actually Thursday. I'm going away on vacation, so we're recording a bunch of these in advance. And I was wondering if you're having a better day than Julian Assange.
I guess I am. I don't
know.
Didn't
hear about that?
No.
Well, you knew he was basically in asylum in the Ecuadorian embassy in London, right? And he's been there for like 7 years.
When I go for my asylum, that's where I like to be, is the Ecuadorian embassies. They treat you very well there, from what I hear.
Well, not anymore. The Ecuadorians basically revoked his status, and the cops came in and arrested him. So he is now in jail.
Well,
and probably will be for some time. So I'm hoping you're having a better day than him.
I'm not in jail. I'm not recording from any of the fine facilities in the state of Louisiana, so you are correct. I missed that. I've been otherwise occupied with various other things today, looking around. I missed that. So it's tough when you've been living the life of luxury in an Ecuadorian embassy. Say that 3 times fast. Yeah, I didn't hear about that. So unfortunate for him then.
Well, he was featured in a movie. Well, his character was featured in a movie, and we talked a couple months ago about our spring movies upcoming, and now we've kind of gone through a lot of those, and you had an update to give us some numbers on how some of the movies that we discussed actually did.
Yes, we had talked about a number of movies, what we thought would do well, ones we were hoping to see in the theaters, ones that we were not quite as interested in or not looking forward to. And we haven't gone through all the movies yet from that preview, but we've seen a good number of them release. Of course, so far, the big story box office wise has been Captain Marvel, which, shocking, I know, Marvel with another huge hit on their hands. Sitting as of April 10th, domestic totals approaching 400 million, slightly over 377 million at the moment. Worldwide, it's crossed $1 billion. I mean, Marvel just prints money these days, don't they? It's not really shocking when they release a movie. Eventually, they're going to have a movie that bombs, right? At some point, or disappoints, or I guess people forget they released that Hulk standalone movie that had Edward Norton in it, and that kind of underperformed at the box office. And that's probably their only real kind of miss to date. But everything else just, like I said, it's a money-making machine for Disney and Marvel Studios at this point. And we kind of predicted that. I didn't get a chance to see it in theaters. From what I'm to understand, I know enough about the plot and, without being super spoiled, and I'm not going to spoil it for anybody, but it's not necessarily a must-see before you see the next Avengers movie, before you see Endgame. So she's in Endgame. As long as you know who she is, then I think that you don't need to see it. I may see it before Endgame. I don't know. My schedule looks kind of busy myself the next couple of weeks. Did you get a chance to see that in theaters, or?
No, I did not.
You said you thought you might, but I'm assuming it's just been timing and scheduling for you as well.
Yeah. I just have not had the opportunity to go see it.
Well, everybody else has apparently seen it, because it is by far and away your top domestic grossing movie so far in 2019. The surprise for me is the movie Us. And I think we had talked about that during our preview. Jordan Peele's, not a follow-up because it's not a sequel to it, but, he had done Get Out, which was very well received, both commercially and from critics. And this was kind of his next step. And that movie's making some bank. They're at 155 million right now domestic. Their foreign is not near as much as a movie like Captain Marvel, but that's a movie right there Did you expect to see that movie making? I mean, we talked about it making money, I guess, more than Get Out did because more people knew to go see something that Peele made. But 155 million, that's more than the Lego Movie 2, which has been out longer. It's almost matched How to Train Your Dragon, and I assume is going to end up passing that. It's going to be the number 2 movie in the country so far going into the middle of April. Would you have predicted that? That's kind of stunning, isn't it?
I don't know that I would have predicted that it was that high, but it's in retrospect, it's not that surprising. His first movie, Get Out, which was critically acclaimed, it did okay in the movie theater, it did really well in the movie theater, but I always got the sense that it did well in the movie theater, but a lot more people saw it once it was on the streaming services or, DVD, Blu-ray, whatever. And a lot more people saw it then. And then it's like, wow, that was a really great movie. And then people, I would imagine, would, and again, I'm not into that kind of movie, so I didn't see Get Out and I didn't see Us because I just don't do horror films. But if you liked the first one, you're probably going to be like, you're going to give the guy a chance the second time. I mean, that's usually the way movie things work. That's why we all went and saw M. Night Shyamalan's second movie, right? Yeah. Even though it was terrible, but the first one was so good, right?
I don't think his second movie was terrible. I think it took him a little while to get terrible. I think he had to decline.
It was not nearly
as good. It would have been hard to top The Sixth Sense. That was kind of such a great movie and such an opener for him. There was kind of nowhere to go but down for him at that point.
Well, you say that, except that Get Out was really good, won a ton of awards, and I've heard people say that Us was better.
Yeah.
He actually has defied that, the only place to go was down after such a big success on your first one. So I guess I'm shocked at how much money it made. I'm not shocked that it was way more successful than Get Out. That makes sense to me.
Here's some numbers to throw out at you for how mind-blowing Us was. And I'm literally quoting Box Office Mojo, who described it as a mind-blowing $70 million opening weekend. That opening weekend was the third largest opening all time for an R-rated horror film.
Behind what? Give us a reference there.
Halloween, last October, the sort of sequel to the original. And it looks like The Nun was another one that was in there for opening for the weekend. But It was big for a horror movie. It had the second largest opening ever for a live action original picture. So once you start throwing away the sequels and the properties based on other properties, so anything derivative from a comic book or a book just in general, when we're talking about an actual original concept film, it had the second largest opening ever for one of those. That's unbelievable. It also ended up being, as far as the box office goes, it's the largest opening, I believe, ever for an original. Again, using that not derivative from some other work. The largest opening ever for an original R-rated film, which topped Ted, apparently was the original one. And original horror film was a movie called A Quiet Place, which was actually a pretty good film. And I know you don't do horror, but that was actually, that's not necessarily like horror when you think of, Jason and Freddy Krueger and those type of things. It's not a slasher film. A Quiet Place is not that type of horror film at all. But
is that the one with John Krasinski?
Yes, it is. So it was definitely a surprise, I think, that it was this big of a phenomenon. It was made on about $20 million, according to Box Office Mojo. So that film is raking in some serious dough for Universal, which is its distributor. And for Jordan Peele, I assume, as he's going to continue to get a lot of work off of a movie like this. Other movies we talked about Dumbo, which looked like it had good previews, and we thought it was going to do really well. It's sitting right now, as of this recording, a little bit under 80 million on the domestic side. But that was not what was projected. And the budget, according to Box Office Mojo, is in the $170 million range. Currently, worldwide, it's a little bit over 210, almost 220 million. But I think the multiplier you really need to start turning a profit, from what I've always heard, is about 3 times what your budget is. So this movie's going to have to get well over the $500 to $600 million worldwide mark to start turning in money. That's a little surprising. I would have thought Dumbo would have done better, but you pointed out it didn't really get the best scores either from critics or from audiences, which it surprises me. But then again, it's a Tim Burton film. We thought that might have been a little mismatched a little bit for Dumbo anyway. Maybe that has something to do with it. Like I said, I haven't seen it, and I'm assuming you haven't either. So,
no, I have not. Yeah, it did not get a particularly good score.
Is that audience or critics or both?
It looks like both. Everything I saw was just kind of, there was something missing or something. It was like the story wasn't great. It didn't connect well, apparently. So.
Is Dumbo outdated for a modern audience? Is that what it is? Flying elephants are not
in a circus, right? I mean, do kids even go to? I mean, the circus doesn't really exist anymore.
I was going to say, is there even such a thing as a traditional circus anymore? I feel like there really isn't anymore. That's an old time convention. So I don't know. I'd seen the previews. I thought it looked intriguing. I didn't get a chance to get out to see it because I don't ever get a chance to see as many movies in the theater as I'd like to. But it just surprised me. It felt like that was a slam dunk. How could this not make money? But there's always some film that you look at and you say, you think it will, and then it doesn't. A movie that I was off on because I was very suspect about what it was going to be was the movie Shazam, DC's Captain Marvel. And I was a little bit worried. I knew it was going to be a comedy. I knew it was going to have that type of tone, and I was really worried about how that was going to play out. Well, apparently that one did get very good reviews, both from critics and from audiences. That was number one in the country this past weekend. It's poised to be number one again this upcoming weekend. It made about 53 million and change over this past weekend, and that was a little bit over, I think, what early projections were for it. So, and not much competition, or certainly not new competition this week. DC, it's funny. They kind of failed with Justice League, and Batman versus Superman didn't quite do what they expected it to. But these smaller projects seem to be working. We saw it with Aquaman. Now we're seeing it with Shazam. I'm guessing you haven't seen the film yet, but I know you, as you told me, word of mouth on it's really good. I mean, you'd seen the trailers, and what did you describe it as? I think you said there was one word that you could really describe the movie as, which is probably why it's making the money it's making.
It just seemed like everyone said it was fun. It was entertaining. It was witty. It was funny. I think when you described it, Shazam should have had a comedic element to it. And you were, I think, concerned that maybe they wouldn't get that right. And it seems like they did.
I was worried it would be too over the top, or that there wasn't going to be some level of seriousness, like it would almost be like a parody of itself. And that's what worried me. But apparently that's not the case. There are funny moments, but they're mixed in with serious moments, and there is some stakes in it. So that in itself means that they did get it right. And that impresses me.
The one thing I will say is they kind of had that template to do that, because we had seen two Deadpool movies that had done really good jobs of being able to combine the really funny moments with the real serious moments, right?
Yeah.
They kind of gave the roadmap of how you can do that. And maybe that's what I didn't see it yet. And because it's been so popular, I'm sure I will.
I will say I had not intended to see it. Now I might actually do so because, like I said, I saw enough of the previews. I've heard enough good things about it. I may actually give it a chance. And I'll leave two things on that note before we start moving away from the movies here. The two things of note is you said it was fun, and it's hard to be funny or keep an audience entertained for lengthy movies. The runtime on that movie was over 2 hours, 2 hours and 12 minutes, again, according to Box Office Mojo. So for a film like that to keep you engrossed enough and to be fun for 2 hours plus, that's an achievement in itself, right? The second thing is, and we mentioned it during our preview, the director was David Sandberg, who prior to this, his two big movies were Lights Out and Annabelle Creation, two horror films. Again, I'm assuming two movies you haven't seen. Not exactly the director, and I said that at the time, that I would have picked to helm a movie like this, but maybe unlike Tim Burton and Dumbo, which maybe didn't turn out to be the fit that they were hoping for, in this case, kind of the mismatched director and film, apparently it worked. And they were already talking sequel to it. And it does show that Warner Brothers and by extension DC, they can do a good movie. It's weird. They're doing sort of a reverse Marvel template here, in that they're making more successes with these side movies between this, like I said, Aquaman, Wonder Woman before it, and yet they can't get the big one right. So again, it's just an interesting start to the box office. And we'll be coming up sometime in May with our midsummer movie preview, and we'll have more to talk about there. But it's just been interesting to see what's been taking off and what people are finding interesting and fun to watch. So,
can I add one thing here?
Yeah, sure.
So as I'm looking down this list of the movies, the top 100 movies, domestic grosses on Box Office Mojo, scrolling down to number 45 and number 47. And I find it interesting that two movies that were re-released on their 80th anniversary both had box office grosses of over $2 million. And that was Gone with the Wind and Wizard of Oz. So in limited runs, for a very short period of time, I think typically with that stuff, they only show it maybe once a day, limited number of theaters. And the costs of those movies were sunk 80 years ago, and they're still showing them and making money on them.
That's kind of been banked at this point, as they would say.
Right. Like, who owns the property at this point? Is it, who gets the residuals on that? Everyone's dead.
It's a case of, though, they are classics, and that's what happens. People will still watch a classic.
They're 80 years old, right? There's nobody who was in any of those movies who's still alive.
But I will say, I've seen both of those films. It's different when you see it in a theater. I didn't see Wizard of Oz, let's say, playing in a theater near me, but I would have probably, if I'd had the chance and the opportunity and the free time, I would have minded seeing it on a big screen, just because it would have been a different experience. But you can do that with a classic. You can't do that with a crappy movie. And those are both all-time classics. So,
but they made $2 million, which is just shy of a movie a little bit further up called The Beach Bum, which I saw the preview for, and I was like, oh my God, this is going to be awful. And sure enough, it was. Matthew McConaughey, Snoop Dogg, Isla Fisher, Martin Lawrence, and Zac Efron, and it has grossed $3 million.
When your brand new movie is being beaten by a movie that everyone on the planet feels like they've seen already, and that has run on free television numerous times, that's not good, right? That's a bad sign. That's the sign of a box office failure, I think, is appropriate. So, wow. Yeah. Speaking of failure, I feel like talking about what I perceive to be as failure. And I think this is going to be a running theme over the course of the baseball season. It's going to be a Randy's managerial rant. And I don't know if we'll be able to work one of these in every week. I feel like we could almost work one of these in every day, because we talked a little bit in one of our previous podcasts when we were talking about the start of the baseball season about managers doing just dumb things. And you quizzed me, and I didn't even know who half these people were. And the ones I did know, I only knew because they were doing stupid things, right? Did you see some of the baseball in Philadelphia this week?
I did not. I was under the weather earlier this week, and literally I slept a whole day. I lost the whole day. And I think it was the day that the issue that you are going to talk about happened. So,
yeah. I was going to say, if you were sick and under the weather, then you know how Philly fans felt watching Wednesday's debacle at the hands of Washington, where they got beaten 15-1. 2 touchdowns by the Redskins and a 2-point conversion. I'm not sure how the Eagles got that point in that game, but was that Canadian rules, or is that some sort of college football run back rule or something like that gets you the 1 point? I don't know. Managers just don't know how to manage a pitching staff or a bullpen anymore. And the over-managing, and it's something we talked about before, just boggles my mind. And these are guys being paid to do this. So let me set the situation up for you. Okay. You're Gabe Kapler, who we heard numerous times last season as Philly's manager seemed overmatched. Would you say that's kind of a fair statement to say he was kind of overmatched last season at various points?
Yes.
Yeah. So Kapler, who really did not use his bullpen very well last year, did this little number on Tuesday night. So Washington beat Philly 10-6 while you were not feeling well and missed it in extra innings. That game was a game that Philly was leading 6-5 going into the top of the ninth, and they had a reliever blow a save. So ask me which one of the closers in Philadelphia blew that save. Don't cheat. Don't look at the box score. You know who's on the Philly roster and who's in their bullpen somewhat. Which one of the closers blew that game in the ninth? They technically have 3 closers, and I'm putting that in quotation marks, on that roster, as in a guy who started the season as the closer last year and has closing experience, another guy who has multiple years of closing experience, and another guy who took over as closer last year. I'm not naming any names. Which one of those 3 would you think blew the save against Washington?
I'm going to say Robertson.
David Robertson.
Guessing. Yes.
Formerly of the Yankees, formerly of the White Sox, has been a very effective closer. He didn't pitch in that game. So try again. That gives you 2 options left. I'll name who they are. Hector Neris, who started the year as the closer last year, lost the job. Sir Anthony Dominguez, who pitched very well, and took over. Which one of them blew it?
I'm going to say Sir Anthony.
He did not. Must be Neris, right? Nope, wasn't him either. None of those 3 guys showed up in the ninth inning. That was blowing the save. One, Edubre Ramos. I may be saying his name right. I may not be.
Who?
Okay, yeah. He was joined by one of the 7,800 Alvarez that are currently in the major and minor league system, Jose Alvarez, who has a 12.46 ERA on the season so far, by the way. That's the 2 guys that showed up in the ninth inning for the Phillies. Now, ask me the obvious question. I can see the wheels turning over there. This is the part where you ask me what?
Why? Why was he in the game?
You're supposed to say, well, did Dominguez and Neris, were neither one of them available? Ask me. Ask me if either one of them were available.
I'm guessing that both of them were, the way you're talking about this.
Oh, yeah. They both pitched earlier in the game. Dominguez took over for Aaron Nola in the 7th. He got 2 outs in the inning, threw 4 pitches. 4. How many pitches do you get when you warm up? When you not in the bullpen, like when you're getting warm to come into the game, but when you go out to the mound.
8.
Okay. So he got more pitches out there on the mound warming up before he actually started pitching than he actually threw in the game. Neris had a rougher inning. He pitched in the 8th, but he didn't give up a run. He walked 2 guys. He struck a guy out. He threw 30 pitches, but he pitched in the 8th. Robertson, I'm guessing, was unavailable. I'm thinking I may know the reason why. Now, you're supposed to ask, why did Sir Anthony Dominguez only throw 4 pitches? Apparently, reading the play-by-play, and I wasn't watching the game, so maybe I might be wrong here, but I feel like I'm not. It looks as if he was double switched out for Aaron Altherr and pulled from the game. Now, he had pitched the day before, had Dominguez. He threw an inning. He threw 11 pitches the day before. The day before that, he had not pitched at all. How many times did Dominguez throw multiple innings last year? Numerous times, right? Mm-hmm. He was being used in the 7th and 8th. He was being used to pitch the 8th and the 9th. 4 pitches. What? Why? Now, you're supposed to say, well, it was a close game, right? It was a 6-5 game when Dominguez came in. You're supposed to say something like, well, maybe they needed to pinch hit for him. Well, his spot in the order wasn't up. They double switched. Kapler did a double switch and pulled him out of the game. So Dominguez was replaced by Aaron Altherr, backup outfielder. I'm trying to get into Kapler's head. It's kind of a scary thing when you're trying to figure out why somebody's doing something, because you're supposed to say, well, I guess the pitcher's spot was up in the 7th. And maybe he wanted to try to tack on more runs, and maybe he pinch hit for Dominguez. That's what you're thinking, right?
Yep.
Nope, that's not what happened. It was Harper, Hoskins, Realmuto who singled, and Odubel Herrera grounded out. That was your Phillies bottom of the 7th. So the pitcher's spot wasn't up. He purposely double switched to get Neris in the game in the 8th and pull Dominguez after using him for only 4 pitches in the top of the 7th? Why not leave him in to pitch the 8th, use Neris in the 9th, who at least, again, is better than the other 2 clowns he brought out there? Wouldn't that have made a little bit more sense? Or, I don't know, maybe you're Gabe Kapler and you're really thinking ahead and you're like, well, that pitcher's spot will be up before the game's over, and I want to get I want to move things around in the lineup so the pitcher's spot isn't going to come up in the 8th. Well, here's the thing. The pitcher spot did come up in the 8th thanks to that Real Muto single in the 7th. It was actually the 3rd spot up in the 8th that Althair came up with 2 outs, nobody on. He lined out, ended the inning. If Dominguez pitches the 7th and the 8th inning, are you bringing him out for the 9th? No, right?
No, definitely not.
So what would you have been doing in that position if Dominguez was still in the game and the pitcher spot was still coming up at that point and you hadn't done the double switch? What would you be doing? Pinch hitting anyway.
Right.
This is basic baseball strategy. How does Gabe Kapler not understand this? And by the way, for anyone listening, I'm not a Phillies fan, and I don't own any of these guys. So this isn't even from a fantasy perspective. So I'm not bitching, unlike somebody in our fantasy baseball league who owns both Dominguez and David Robertson and is trying to figure out how the 2 best relievers in the pen, I believe, have combined at the moment for 0 saves. Your 2 saves so far from the Philly bullpen are one by Neris and one by Pat Neshek. So Robertson, who they're paying a little chunk of change to, and to be honest, hasn't been all that good, and Dominguez, who also hasn't been all that good, but it's early. You can't judge a relief pitcher in particular on 1 or 2 outings, can you? When you look at their ERA and WHIP, all it takes is 1 bad outing, and then it takes a reliever 2 months to get those numbers looking normal again. You have to trust talent, don't you? Am I off base here, Steven? Am I missing something here?
Well, again, he put in his pitcher in the 7th inning, maybe his best reliever in Sir Anthony Dominguez in the 7th inning to get out of a tight spot, right? In a close game, a 1-run game. I get that. That I have no problem with. But you're right. Why he pitched 4? He threw 4 pitches. Why isn't he coming out in the 8th inning?
Doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any sense. And you said it was a tight spot. That game was a 6-2 game starting the top of the 7th. And there were a couple home runs, and it was 6-5. And then he brought Dominguez in to basically a 1-run game, 1 out, and nobody on base. Like I said, he got a ground out and a foul out in 4 pitches. Why not leave him in? I can tell you why he didn't leave him in, because he doesn't do it with any of his pitchers now anyway. The Phillies, as of this recording, have played 11 games. They've used 5 pitchers or more in 7 of those 11 games. That's counting the starter. They've used 4 pitchers or more in every game they've played this season. Kapler has not gotten out of a single game yet without using at least 3 guys out of his pen. He completely overmanages his pen, ridiculously so. It cost the Phillies last year. I think I picked them to win the division. I might want to take that pick back because I can't believe they're going to win the division with this imbecile running the team. Again, I'm not a major league manager. I'm not being paid. I'm not pretending I'm an expert on anything, but it goes back to that Madden principle. And we'll bump it to the show. There's an 11-year-old who plays the show on his PlayStation who knows better than this. 4 pitches, Steven. But this is a trend. All these managers do this now. They all feel the need to overwork their bullpen. We were talking the other day. What's missing in baseball that we used to see? Because you know what? This could have been used in the Philly pen last night where they got the hell beat out of them 15-1. What don't we really see anymore on teams?
Teams don't have long relievers.
No, they don't have anybody that seems like that can go 3 or 4 innings and, your starter gets knocked out. You're getting blown out. Bring this guy in, let him just basically mop up. Or sometimes if you're up 15-1, Washington used 4 pitchers last night. Up 15-1. They won 15-1 and they used 4 pitchers. And it wasn't because the starter got hurt. Hellickson was their starter. He went 6 innings, threw 100 pitches. Tony Sipp came in. Okay? He was the guy who came in after Hellickson, threw to one batter, 4 pitches, and then he was lifted.
And what was the score at the time?
At that point, it was because Washington had tacked on 5 runs in the top of the 7th. It was at that point 14-0. 14-0. Why is Tony Sipp throwing 4 pitches? What the hell? And again, he started the inning. Got 1 out, and then they took him out. You're up 14-0. You or I might have been able to get through the inning without giving up a 14-run lead, right? What is wrong with these guys? I mean, how in the world can you possibly think that doing this is good? And the sad thing is, we've talked that baseball is likely going to be implementing in the future rules about how many batters you have to face to kind of eliminate this stupidity. The irony is they're going to be saving these idiots from themselves, aren't they?
Yeah, that's exactly right.
You know, in our fantasy league, we have a lot of rules. And some of the rules we've talked about, you know, involving trading and dump trades, rebuilding trades for those who don't play fantasy sports is essentially what they are, between contenders and non-contenders. We have rules on the books. And sometimes it's like, you know, we have these rules to keep competitive balance in play. But the irony is sometimes it just keeps owners who don't know what they're doing sometimes and saves them from themselves. Right? We've talked about that in the past. You know, real life mirroring art. Real baseball is going to be doing this if they implement those rule changes. So that's my rant. I mean, like I said, this doesn't really surprise me that he would do that. But again, why? You know what the whole thing last night with Tony Sipp is? I believe Sipp's a lefty, isn't he?
Yes, he is.
So a manager was playing lefty-righty bullshit in a 14-0 game in the 7th inning. What's wrong with that picture? In April. We're taping this. It's April 11th. How the fuck do you expect your bullpen is actually going to be serviceable when you're running pitchers out left and right and left and right and left and right all fucking day, all week, all year long? You're not going to make it to September. I don't think Washington's going to be a contender in that division because I didn't think after some of the losses, losing Harper, that they would be. But if they are, that bullpen's going to be gassed if this is how they use them all season. We already know Philly's bullpen might already be gassed the way Kapler's using them. I hope they've got more arms and they have fresh arms because they're going to need them. And they're not the only teams. And like I said, I have no stake in this. I don't own any of those relievers. I don't own any Phillies. I just can't stand watching these guys with these jobs who don't understand basic knowledge of the game that I would think, like I said, the 11-year-old playing the show on his PlayStation understands. I don't do that. I'm not going to do that. That's stupid. These are the guys running these teams. And some sabermetric guy, and we both are a believer in sabermetrics, right? I mean, we definitely believe in it. Maybe there'll be some sabermetric guy that can get on our Twitter or reply to this and tell me why we're wrong. But I'm sorry. You can't tell me that's good management. That's not a good use of your resources. Used to be 20 years ago, you're up 14-0. Your starter gets through 6. You're bringing some guy in. He's pitching the last 3 innings. If he gives up 3 or 4 runs, who cares? Nobody's coming back likely from 14-0, right? It's just not happening. So you're not going to waste your important guys. You got somebody that comes out either when you're way ahead, you're way behind, your starter gets hurt. You had that innings eater. You don't have that anymore because all these managers want all these little toys to mix and match. I think because they think it makes them look smart. It doesn't make you guys look smart. It makes you look stupid. There you go. That's my rant for today. It won't be the last one. We're only in April. And the stupidity has already started.
Couple of interesting things as I'm looking at that box score from that 15-1 game that you were mentioning, the Nationals over the Phillies. So the interesting thing about that box score as I'm looking at it is the 9th inning was pitched for Washington by Trevor Rosenthal, who pitched an inning, gave up a 1 earned run on 3 walks, and it lowered his ERA to 72 on the season. And apparently that is the first inning he has actually thrown this year because the first 10 batters that he faced this season all got on base.
I could do that. So could you.
Oh my God, that's just crazy.
Terrible.
And that guy used to be good. He was a great,
he was dominant at one point.
Yeah, he had a great year as a closer for St. Louis that one year, right? The other interesting thing is you mentioned how the Phillies are going to kill their bullpen.
I know where you're going with this. Because I'm just noticing the same thing. Yes.
Who pitched in the ninth there?
That guy of all trades out there pitched and struck two guys out. That's maybe Kapler's going to use him to close out the next game.
He obviously must have it in for our friend Jeff. That's all I can say.
I don't know. I want to also point out two other things from that box score, and then we'll move on from this game and this debacle. Is Nick Pivetta gave up 7 earned, and Pivetta just is Washington owns him. And I had Pivetta on my fantasy team, my main fantasy team last year, and Washington just beat him like a rented mule pretty much every time they faced him. That's one of those we couldn't have gotten to Vegas or Jersey, or in this case now for me, Biloxi, fast enough to bet on that game to take Washington to win if I'd seen Pivetta was pitching. The other thing was there's Juan Nicasio coming in relief of Pivetta, who threw 36 pitches, it looks like. Nicasio was a starter. Why didn't Kapler leave him in? I'm sure he could have thrown more pitches than that. I'm sure you could have gotten another couple innings and spared some of these other crappy relievers who got shelled and didn't pitch well either. I'm sure you could have saved them. You could have saved Althierzar, maybe. You might need it, Kapler.
You know what else was interesting about that game? Washington scored 15 runs without a single home run.
They just piled up a lot of hits and 6 walks in those. And it's just one of those, every time a guy got on, he came around to score. So just bad baseball there. Just lots of bad stuff there. Speaking of bad, and speaking of baseball, we have another little game here. We have good Chris. We have bad Chris. So for those who do not follow Major League Baseball as closely as we do, there are 2 Chris Davises of note in the major leagues. There's Chris with a K, and there's Chris with a C. Good Chris, bad Chris. Do you want to tell us about our Chris Davises for those who may not? Because they're really pretty much the same guy, aren't they, Steven? Can't really tell them apart other than, they spell their names differently.
Well, one of them's white and one of them's black, so we'll start there. So that's a little bit of a difference. One of them has talent and one of them is completely washed up. So there's another difference.
Minor differences here, Stephen. Minor differences.
Yeah. So Chris Davis with a K, the good Chris Davis, who plays for the Oakland Athletics, currently on the season, has 64 at-bats. He has 9 home runs. He is on pace for 86 home runs and 162 RBIs.
One of those would be a record. That's not too bad.
Yes.
He's pretty good, actually.
He is very good. He had 2 more home runs today. He had 2 home runs yesterday, so that's 4 in the last 2 games. I don't know how much we should count that. That was against Baltimore.
Well, there you
go. Both games. So on the other side of the ledger, they actually were facing each other, right? Because the bad Chris Davis, Chris with a C, plays for Baltimore, and after having a number of days off because he was on such a terrible slump, I mean, to call it a slump is an insult to most slumps, he went 0 for 3 today, so he is now 0 for his last 52 going back to last season, last September, and that is a Major League Baseball record. No other player in Major League Baseball history
that wasn't a pitcher,
had,
right? A pitcher might have, but I believe it's not. Yeah, any non-pitcher. No one's ever done this before.
Correct.
Right?
Correct. Not only that, he was so bad last year that he set a record for the lowest.
How do you fall off from terrible?
Well, you go 0 for 52. That's what you do, right? I mean,
this is like a reverse DiMaggio he's got going on right here. This is astounding. You or I could go 0 for 52.
I could. He did have a walk today, though. I mean, he did get on base. He had a walk. So
was he able to find the base? Did he remember where it was?
They had to point him to it. He started walking towards third. He was like a little leaguer. Have you ever seen that when the kids play little league? The first time they play t-ball, the kid hits the ball and they don't know where to run because they don't know.
I was going to ask, are they going to start putting the ball on the tee for him? Would that help?
I'm not sure that would help. I think he'd still strike out if it was on a tee.
That t-ball can be difficult. Let's not discount it. So I would say the really bad part of the Orioles in this story is that Chris Davis is being paid $23 million this year to go 0 for 52 counting back to last season, in which he was paid $23 million last year to post arguably the worst season by a everyday regular in history. On the bright spot, the Orioles only owe him another $69 million after this season is up. That's not going to end well, is it? 69 million reasons for them to be not happy at the moment. And by all accounts, I think we had talked about it off the show, is that, Davis is apparently a really nice guy, a really good guy in the clubhouse, apparently feels terrible. He's not laughing his way to the bank, but he is going to the bank. He is still cashing the checks. And, the Oriole fans, it's bad and things are going rough for you when fans are booing you incessantly. And then they even start feeling bad for you because apparently on some of the at-bats before he set that record of futility, actually were cheering him, like giving him like the cheers of support. Like, geez, we feel so bad for you. Watching him at the plate's like watching a wreck on the side of the highway. You don't want to look, but there's that macabre part of you that wants to kind of turn and see what's going on over there. That's like a Chris Davis at bat. Slight difference between those Davises, just a little bit.
Yeah, I will say this about Chris Davis. I know you're feeling bad about him, but the Orioles wanted to send him to the minors last year to work on his swing because obviously he just wasn't hitting anything, and he refused. At some point, you have to take responsibility for how bad you're playing and, maybe going up against some lesser players. Well, let's be honest. Isn't it a confidence thing? I don't think it's a talent thing. I think it's just a confidence thing. To be honest with you, it's amazing that in some of these swings, he didn't just happen to hit the ball and it dribbled somewhere and got a hit, right? I mean, how many times do we see where a guy was completely fooled on a pitch, it goes off the end of the bat, and it somehow finds a hole somewhere in the infield, and the guy gets on base?
Javi Baez of the Cubs, who swings at pretty much everything, but has the talent to do so. Reminds me of like a young Vladimir Guerrero who would swing at pretty much everything, but he manages to hit it and crush it. Baez had a game the other day where I believe the pitch might have actually bounced in front of the plate, or if it didn't, it came really close. And Baez just stuck his bat out there and barely made contact and had just enough to bloop it over the shortstop's head, and it landed in for a hit. You're right. That happened. How do you go this many at bats and not do something? Davis was hitless the other day. Baltimore hung a 12 spot on Oakland a couple games back, and Davis was over in part of that while everybody else was teeing off on Oakland pitching. I will say there's an ESPN headline that says now 0 for 53 owes Davis as, quote, trusting the process. Well, I can't even make jokes about that phrase. That's not really the process I'd want to trust if I was Chris Davis. But absolute futility and trusting the process kind of went together for a long time in Philadelphia. So, I guess maybe that is the proper term to use.
Yep, I agree. It's pretty amazing. While we're doing this, the Masters is actually going on, and I'll give you a quick little update. We're obviously in the first round here, and I know we talked the other day when we were doing one of these podcasts, and you were saying, it's not a who's that, it's a who cares. Well, that's not the case here in the Masters. It's a who's who of great golfers who's at the top. Tiger finished -2, which at the time was only a shot back. Since then, you have Brooks Koepka at -6, Bryson DeChambeau at -6, Ian Poulter, Dustin Johnson, and Phil Mickelson all at -4. So you've got some really big names up at the top. Koepka has won, I think, the last 2 U.S. Opens. Dustin Johnson has a number of majors. Phil Mickelson has a number of majors. You know who doesn't have a number of majors?
Colin Montgomery, yeah.
Colin Montgomery does not have a number of majors.
Our
Just
running
saying.
joke over the years, yeah.
I wanted to congratulate you, by the way.
We're going to remain tied in PGA major victories with Colin Montgomery. We are still tied as of now, right? And will be at the end of the weekend.
Yep, Colin did not play, so he cannot win a major.
Well, congratulations to you as well. Yeah. Once this airs, which will be presumably on Tuesday or right about, the Masters will be open. So as we're talking about the first round, obviously we're doing this in hindsight. We'll see how this turns out. I will note that this is the first round that Tiger Woods has been under par in a major championship in 5 years. So there was a time where we talked about Tiger Woods as being a guy that was going to pass Jack Nicklaus. It looked like that was going to be a foregone conclusion. And then things went off the rails. He had injuries, he had personal problems, and Tiger Woods, it's been a long road back. And I got to believe there was a Tiger fatigue, I think, at one point in his career when he was so successful, because it got to the point where you were rooting for somebody to beat him, because when you're at the top of the hill like that and you are the undisputed best person in the world and it's not even close at what you do, it's easy to root for the underdog. And it's kind of come a little bit full circle that with all his issues and problems and injuries and everything that's befallen him, some of it self-inflicted, some of it not, over his time, now Tiger kind of is a little bit of the underdog. So I got to believe if he's on the leaderboard, if he's within striking distance come Sunday, that's going to be one hell of a crowd behind him, I think, to win the Masters, because that would be a great Masters story. And we've seen some great stories at the Masters in the past, right?
We have.
My favorite Masters story, and it relates to Tiger in that it was a Jack Nicklaus one, was Nicklaus winning that Masters out of nowhere when he was, I believe at the time, the oldest person to win the Masters tournament, with his son caddying for him.
Yep.
If I remember correct.
1986 is when he did that. Yep, absolutely.
And I remember just being transfixed because as a kid, I wasn't a big, huge golfing fan, but, if I had a favorite golfer, it was Jack Nicklaus. So maybe this will be a moment like that. So for Tiger, we'll see.
Well, to give you a sense of Tiger, right? So he has 14 majors, right? Do you realize the last time he won a major was in 2008? We're going on 11 years.
Like I said, there was a point where it looked like it was going to be inevitable that he was going to pass Nicklaus, and it might not even be close. How many is he behind Nicklaus?
4.
I mean, he's not catching it. He could win one, and he'd be 3, but you just get the feeling like he's up there, and he's got a lot of competition. He's not like he used to be. Even now, he's never going to be head and shoulders above everybody else he's playing with. It's hard to win a major.
It is, but
ask Colin Montgomery. It's hard to win a major, right? It's hard. Ask Colin. He'll tell you.
Jack Nicklaus, I heard him interviewed the other day, and he said that he had just played around with Tiger maybe a couple weeks ago, and he said that he's never seen Tiger play so well. And he's played with him for years, right? And he's like, he looks really good. He looks healthy. He's hitting the ball true. And to be honest with you, Tiger missed, today, he missed 4 or 5 putts by literally millimeters. If he hit a couple of those, then he's only a shot or 2 back. So, and at this point, he's only 4 shots back. It's really early in the tournament. We'll see how this whole weekend transpires. I always look forward to watching. And this year, as I'm looking down the leaderboard, it's like, wow, there's a lot of big names right up near the top. If that all stays the same, it's going to be a tremendous weekend.
The Masters is always a sign of spring. To me, it always signaled the beginning of, winter's coming to an end, and, baseball's just starting, and it's, the year really getting into full swing. So I've always loved the Masters for that. But I'm going to make us both feel old. Tiger Woods is 43. Again, I remember Tiger Woods as the young phenom. He's 43. He's now the grizzled veteran. All right. So that just makes me feel old. I don't know about you. It should be a great tournament. And like I said, there's always a good story to come out of the Masters, it seems like.
Yeah. But you'd say that it's old, except, Bernard Longer, who's a great golfer, he's 61 years old. He's 1 under par today. He's right in the middle of it at 61.
That's a name from the past. Wow.
Right. So you can. I mean, golf is one of those games where if you strike the ball well, you can compete well into your 40s and 50s. I mean, Jim Furyk, who's almost 50, almost won a tournament a couple weeks ago. So it happens. It's not, and he's in great shape, Tiger, as long as he stays healthy. He has 4 or 5 really good years left in him, But you're right.
It's not impossible, but you're right. Golf is one of those sports that you can turn back the clock. Because like I said, we saw Nicklaus do it back in 86, and maybe we'll see Tiger do it in 2019.
Yep.
God, 11 years. That's
11
crazy.
years. Yep. All right. So I have one last thing before we sign off today. And I saw this on the news.
You promised me a surprise.
I did. I saw this on the news, and I thought of you because I said to myself, when Randy hears this, he is going to lose his
more than I already have in this episode? Really? Maybe. Okay. Let's surprise me.
Okay. And I mentioned to you that this didn't have anything to do with sports, that there was one itty bitty tangential connection to sports, but again, very, very, very much on the periphery. Okay. So I'm going to read this article. Kim Kardashian made one of her most shocking announcements yet, as the cover star for Vogue's May 2019 issue said, quote, she's studying to become a lawyer. She is currently doing a 4-year apprenticeship with a law firm in San Francisco and plans to take the bar in 2022. Because California is a state in which you can do an apprenticeship with a law firm and then be eligible to take the bar. You do not have to go to law school.
Really? Kim Kardashian? What kind of desperation would you have to be to hire Kim Kardashian to be your attorney? Are you kidding me? Law school?
No, that's what I'm saying. She's not going to law school.
Wait, so she's going to take the bar? I'm still just...
Unbeknownst to any of us, she's apparently for the last 6 months been working as a intern at a law firm in San Francisco as basically a paralegal, right?
What is she doing as an intern? Well, who would hire her as an intern? I know why I would hire her as an intern. It has nothing to do with her ability to know the law. What about you?
Well, I will say this. She took up the case of a woman, I believe her name was Alice Johnson. It was a grandmother who received a life sentence for a first-time nonviolent drug offense, and she advocated for clemency for this woman, and the president actually gave the woman clemency, so she got out of jail. And that's one of the things that she's really into, this whole, getting people out of jail who got really bad sentences for what they did. Did they do something wrong? Yes, but should anyone really get a life sentence for a first-time nonviolent drug offense? I don't think so. I think we all agree that that's just overboard.
If you were like Nate Newton and transporting like 80,000 tons of cocaine cross country, yeah, it might be a different story. But no, like I had possession of a drug. So that's different.
Even the thing with Nate Newton, does that qualify for a life sentence? I mean, yeah, maybe you should go away for 10 years, but that's not a life sentence. That's a big difference, right?
It sounds like what you're describing, though, isn't even on anywhere near that classification. But that sounds like something you or I could have advocated for and gotten it off, because this woman, well, that sounds terrible. We could have gotten this woman off. We could have gotten this woman freed. Let me rephrase that for our family-friendly listeners at home. It seems like we could have advocated for that and won, because that seems like a no-brainer, doesn't it? Well, if it's a no-brainer, then it fits perfectly with Kim Kardashian. They'll go perfect together. She can take the no-brainer cases, since she really doesn't have much of one up there, I'm guessing. Kim Kardashian, attorney at law. It sounds like a reality show. We going to put that on our network with Oak and Me? Is that going to be like following up? Kim Kardashian, attorney at law.
Why wouldn't it be? I mean, she everything she does is a reality show. Her whole life is a reality show. We talked about how there was like this tangential connection. Of course, her father was O.J. Simpson's first defense attorney before he hired Johnny Cochran and that whole circus.
You know, when I'm not making sex tapes or reality shows or flashing my ass on Instagram or whatever it is she does that makes her important. I don't know. I have mixed emotions. I guess bettering herself and doing something positive for society, that's a step in the right direction over keeping up with the Kardashians, isn't it?
It is.
So I guess props to her. Props to her. Thumbs up.
Yeah, here's the thing. Whether or not she sticks with it is one thing, but if she, if this is what she wants to do, good for her. I mean, we all want to kind of do what our dream is, and this is something she's always wanted to do. So I guess good for her.
Well, you know what then? Props to her for that, because if she is doing something positive to affect society, well, then that separates herself from most of what she's done in her life so far. And it actually separates her from the bulk of what we would call celebrities anyway, is that she'd be making a positive movement going on in the everyday world. And that's something we could both encourage. So if she's out there listening, you go, girl, and good luck. And I'm not sure I'd want you as my attorney. And like I said, I'm pretty sure we could slot in that reality show with her as the attorney right onto our network. We're going to start with all of our great show. Pitch this to somebody, Steven. This is television gold.
I'm sure she already has. Come on.
Well, yeah, she beat us to it, probably.
Of course.
That doesn't really make me angry. I'm just surprised. I'm far angrier about the managing in baseball than I am about anything Kim Kardashian is doing. Like I said, especially since it seems like that's something positive. Unlike these managers who are all doing something that's destructive and negative to their teams. So, maybe Kim Kardashian can manage the Phillies instead of Gabe Kapler. Could she do worse?
I'm 100% sure she wouldn't do worse, because she probably wouldn't do anything, because if you don't know what you're doing, don't you tend to clam up and not do something, as opposed to overdoing it?
You know what she'd do? She'd sit in the dugout and look hot. And that would be all she'd have to do. And then the team would be like, we kind of know how to handle this. And then they would probably be better because someone wouldn't be in there meddling. And the other team would be distracted. Somebody always looking, oh, well, geez, boy, Kim, boy, that looked strike three. Wait, what? When I didn't even see that. I wasn't paying attention. Kardashian's making a trip to the mound.
Hold on. See, now we're on to something. Kim Kardashian lawyer as a reality show is not nearly as interesting as Kim Kardashian manager of the Phillies.
Manager for a day?
For a day? Just make it a year. Do a whole year.
Watching our network, it's Kim Kardashian takes over the reins of a Major League Baseball franchise. Can she do better or worse than the previous manager? We know the answer. Tune in to find out. Is that what you're saying? I'd watch that.
We're just coming up with all these ideas. We're going to have a whole season's worth of new television shows for some new network next year.
We'll have our people send that to her people, and her people send that to the Phillies people, and we'll see where that goes.
So, or we can just call Netflix, and they probably greenlight us over the phone.
Probably so. So that seems like a good point, if any, to wrap up this Off-Topic Tuesday. So until next time, thank you for listening. And again, a reminder to please check us out at excruciatingpodcast.com for links to all the places you can listen to us. Until next time, I'm Randy. And for Steven, thank you again for listening. Have a good one, everybody.
Good night, everybody.
Thank you for listening to the Excruciating Minutiae Podcast. Check us out at excruciatingpodcast.com. Please subscribe to our podcast on any of your favorite podcast platforms and follow us on Twitter at excruciatingpod. See you at the next episode.